Let me ask you something. What do you do when the people you sacrificed everything for turn around and say, "You're not part of this family"? On Christmas, no less. Do you cry, beg, pretend it didn't happen? Or do you do what I did? Smile, serve dessert, and then quietly make plans to vanish so completely they don't realize what they've lost until it's far too late? This isn't a loud, angry revenge story. This is the quiet kind. The kind where a mother stops showing up, stops rescuing, and stops pretending she still belongs. My name is Joanne Pritchard. I'm 64 years old, a widow, and a former bookstore manager from Portland, Oregon. I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment above a flower shop on 19th and Alder. The kind of place that smells like lilies in the spring and burning leaves in the fall. Nothing fancy, but enough for someone like me. Someone who's never asked for much. This past Christmas, like the dozen before it, I cooked for my son Lucas, his wife Karen, and my 2 grandkids, Lily and Owen. They've always come over on Christmas Eve, stayed the night, and then opened presents in the morning like we used to when Lucas was a boy. I'd prepare a big breakfast, blueberry pancakes, crispy bacon, eggs with cheddar, even fresh cinnamon rolls I started proofing 2 days before. The kind of meal that says, "I love you more than I'll ever be able to say out loud." This year, I went all out. I bought Lily a painting set with real canvas and oils. She's 10 and loves to draw. Owen got the astronaut Lego set he'd been dreaming about since Halloween. I spent nearly 2 months budgeting so I could afford it all without dipping into my emergency savings. I didn't mind. They're my family. That's what family does. The night before Christmas, I stayed up until 2 a.m. wrapping presents and laying out matching pajamas for everyone. Yes, even Lucas, even if he rolls his eyes about it every year. I ironed the tablecloth that belonged to my mother, polished the silver, set out candles. I knew none of it mattered, not really, not to them, but to me, it was sacred, ritual, memory, hope. They arrived a little after 10 a.m. on Christmas Day. Lucas barely looked up from his phone when I opened the door. "Hey, Mom," he mumbled, already texting. Karen gave me her usual half smile and offered a shoulder squeeze instead of a hug. Lily and Owen raced past me into the living room. I watched them open their gifts and smiled through the ache in my back. I watched Lily's face light up as she opened the paints, watched Owen's fingers twitch with excitement at the hundreds of tiny plastic Lego pieces. For a moment, just one, I thought, maybe this year will be different. Maybe they'll see me. We ate brunch around noon. Lucas barely touched his food. Karen picked at hers, making comments about carbs. The kids were the only ones who really enjoyed it, scarfing down pancakes before running off to build and paint. Then, after we'd cleared the plates, came the conversation that would unravel it all. I was bringing out a pot of tea when I heard Karen whisper something about the trip. I paused at the kitchen doorway. Lucas murmured, "Just wait till after dessert." But Karen didn't wait. She cleared her throat and looked me square in the eye. "We're going to Hawaii in April. A beach resort, all-inclusive." I smiled. "That sounds lovely. Do you need me to help with the kids while you're gone?" Karen's face tightened. "No, Joanne. It's a family trip." I blinked. "Oh, I just thought—" Lucas cut in, not even glancing up from his phone. "It's just for us, Mom. Me, Karen, the kids, our family." Our family. The word struck sharper than anything I'd heard in years, as if I was something outside of it, something left behind. Lily, sweet Lily, looked up and asked, "But Grandma, aren't you coming?" Karen gave her a sharp look. "No, honey, Grandma's not coming." "Why not?" Lucas sighed like he was exhausted. "Because Grandma's not part of our family that way." I stood there in silence. The room seemed to shrink. My heart felt too big for my chest, and yet too invisible to matter. I smiled. "Of course. I hope you all have a wonderful time." No one noticed my voice shake. They left shortly after that. Karen with her tight smile. Lucas barely said goodbye. The kids hugged me, but Lily kept looking back, confused. When the door closed, I stood in the center of my apartment and felt like a ghost. The stockings were still hung. The tree lights still twinkled. The table was still set for people who just told me I didn't belong. I sat down with a cup of now cold tea and let the reality settle. I had given these people everything, every holiday, every dollar, every ounce of my heart, and now I wasn't even considered part of the family. But that's the thing about quiet women like me. We might go unnoticed, but we're always watching, and sometimes we're planning. Because the truth is, when you realize the only thing tying you to people is what you can give and not who you are, something inside you breaks, then rebuilds itself stronger, sharper, quieter. And that, my dear, is how this revenge story truly begins. The day after Christmas felt colder than usual, even though the weather hadn't changed. Portland was gray and wet, as always, but something inside me had shifted. Something invisible and unnameable had cracked. I spent most of the morning quietly cleaning up, folding the pajamas no one had thanked me for, dumping half-eaten pancakes into the garbage, washing wine glasses that only I ever rinsed. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of the dishwasher and the occasional creak of the radiator. Sounds that usually felt like home, but now only echoed my aloneness. I sat down at the small dining table where we'd shared breakfast, if you could call it that. The table still had little syrup smudges where Owen had dropped his fork, and a crumpled paper napkin Karen had left behind. I reached for it, paused, and then just left it there, like some strange kind of evidence, a reminder that I was there, that I existed, that I served. I don't know what finally pushed me, but around lunchtime, I walked to the back room where I kept my financial records, old shoeboxes filled with envelopes, statements, receipts. I'd never really kept track for the sake of tracking. I'm not that kind of woman, but I'd held on to everything. Maybe part of me always knew a moment like this would come. I started sorting through the papers, one stack at a time. The total wasn't hard to calculate. $55,000 to help Lucas open that restaurant. My retirement savings cashed out early with penalties. $18,500 when their water heater exploded. $12,000 when Karen's mother passed and they needed last-minute flights, hotel, childcare. $4,000 for Owen's surgery. $2,000 last winter when their furnace died. There were more. So many more. Smaller ones that added up. Groceries, birthday parties, back-to-school supplies, utility bills. Just for this month, Mom, we promise. Promises that vanished faster than the checks I wrote. Altogether, $98,300. And that wasn't counting the time. The unpaid babysitting. The hours I spent folding their laundry during sick weeks. The hundreds of miles I'd driven because Lucas's car was in the shop. The birthdays I planned, the Thanksgivings I cooked, the days I rearranged my entire life around theirs. They didn't ask me to do those things, not directly. But when you love someone, and they love you, supposedly, you don't think of it as a transaction. You just give. Because that's what mothers do. That's what I told myself. But here's what I realized sitting at that table with all those receipts fanned out in front of me like some twisted scrapbook. They didn't love me for me. They loved me for what I could give. And when that giving wasn't convenient anymore, when I was no longer a free vacation planner, free babysitter, free bank account, they labeled me extended family. Have you ever looked at someone you love, really looked, and realized they haven't seen you in years? If you're still watching, let me ask you something. Do you have a story like this? A time someone made you feel like a convenience, not a human being? Drop a comment below if this hits close to home. I promise, this space is full of people who understand exactly what you're feeling. That night, Lucas texted, "Hey Mom, hope you're doing okay. Quick thing. Karen's car is acting up. Mechanic says it'll be about $2,500. We're a little tight with the resort deposit and all. Any chance you can help?" There it was. Not a follow-up to Christmas. No apology, not even a sorry about how that went. Just help us again. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't stood in my own home and been told I didn't belong. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I powered off my phone and set it face down. The next morning, I took a walk to clear my head. There's a small park a few blocks from my apartment with benches and a fountain that never runs in winter. It's quiet, peaceful. I sat there watching a pair of crows fight over a discarded sandwich crust and wondered why I hadn't left town after Richard died. Maybe part of me still wanted to be needed, or maybe I was scared of becoming invisible. But you know what's worse than being invisible? Being used. That night, I turned my phone back on. 2 missed calls from Lucas, 1 voicemail. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Really need to get that repair done soon. Let me know. Thanks, love you." Love you. Those words used to mean something. I opened my banking app, looked at the balance in my emergency savings, and thought, this is not for them anymore. I closed the app. Then I started a list, not of the money I'd given, but of what they'd given me in return. It was a short list. A few Mother's Day cards, a Christmas sweater once, some wine that Karen regifted, I'm pretty sure. And this truth hit me so hard I had to sit down. I was the only one keeping this relationship alive, so I decided that night I wouldn't respond. Not this time. Not anymore. Let them figure it out. Let them feel the absence. They wanted a life without me in it. They were about to get exactly that. It's strange the way silence takes up space after a fracture. There were no phone calls the day after Lucas's text. No follow-ups. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Let's talk." Just emptiness, like someone had turned down the volume on my life. But it wasn't quiet, not really. It was loud in my head, echoes of Christmas morning replayed like a cruel recording. "You're not part of this family. It's just for us, our family, not you." I tried to go about my routine. I watered the houseplants, made tea, even did a crossword puzzle. But everything felt off, like I'd stepped into a house I no longer lived in. I'd built this life after Richard passed. I'd filled it with meaning by showing up for others. I'd told myself that if I gave enough, did enough, cared enough, then maybe I wouldn't feel so alone. But now that giving had become my entire identity, and without it, who was I? The days between Christmas and New Year's dragged like fog. Every morning, I'd wake up and wonder if I'd dreamed it all. Maybe Lucas hadn't really said it. Maybe Karen didn't mean it. Maybe Lily's confused little face was just my imagination. But the pain was too precise, too fresh, too real. I didn't respond to Lucas's messages. I didn't check social media. I didn't leave the apartment much, except to buy bread and milk. I thought I would feel empowered, saying no, creating space. But all I felt was nothing. Just a numb ache where the belief used to live. The belief that I mattered to someone. On New Year's Eve, while the city prepared to toast and celebrate and shout things like, "New beginnings," I sat in my living room in my oldest sweatshirt and stared at my bank statements again. $90 and $300. That number haunted me. I'd never needed to calculate it before. I'd given from my heart, not a ledger. But now, it was the only proof that I existed in their lives at all. I stood and walked over to the hall closet. Tucked behind a dusty box of Christmas lights was an envelope. Inside it, copies of the original restaurant loan I'd co-signed for Lucas, the car note I helped pay off, the thank you card from the baby shower that said, "We couldn't have done it without you, Mom." A lie in cursive. I sat on the floor and let myself cry. For the years. The birthdays I spent alone while baking for their parties. The Thanksgiving dinners I packed into Tupperware when they said they were too tired to drive over. The anniversary of Richard's death that came and went without a call. I cried because I had made myself small for their comfort. Because I had said yes, even when I had no business doing so. Because I believed love would come back around if I just stayed patient. But most of all, I cried because I finally accepted what I had refused to believe for years. I didn't belong. Not to them. Not really. I wasn't the mother anymore. Not in their eyes. I was support, backup, the filler between their real life. They called when the babysitter canceled. They visited when the bills piled up. They hugged me when I gave gifts, but never when I just showed up. That kind of loss is invisible to most people. You don't wear black for it. You don't get casseroles dropped off at your door. You don't get sympathy cards when your child stops calling unless he needs something. It's the kind of grief that has no ceremony. But it should, because it changes you. It changes the way you look at yourself in the mirror. You start to wonder if your softness was a weakness, if your kindness was foolishness, if your love was ever love at all, or just convenience wrapped in maternal guilt. That night, while fireworks echoed in the distance, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 3 sentences on the first page. 1. I am no longer available for emotional labor without reciprocity. 2. I am no longer someone's plan B. 3. I am allowed to leave. I didn't know what leaving looked like yet. I didn't know where I'd go or how I'd begin. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like a woman at the edge of a quiet revolution. They say grief makes you hard, but that's not true. Grief makes you clear. You finally see what was always there, but couldn't admit. And what I saw was this. If I stayed, I would keep giving until there was nothing left of me. So I began the slow process of pulling myself out of the story I didn't write. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, deliberate turning of the page. It happened on a Tuesday, not on a birthday, not on a holiday, just a plain gray Tuesday in January, when the clouds in Portland hung so low they looked like they might fall and crush the rooftops. I was doing laundry in the apartment basement, folding towels, humming an old Patsy Cline song without realizing it. And out of nowhere, right there between the dryer cycles and the bleach smell, I felt it. Something inside me clicked, not like a snap, not violent, more like the quiet turn of a lock. A slow, final shift, as if my heart finally caught up to what my mind had been whispering for weeks. I didn't belong to them anymore, and maybe I never really had. I paused with a towel in my hands, staring at nothing in particular. There was no flash of anger, no bitterness, just this strange, hollow calm. Like I'd finally stepped out of a storm I didn't realize I'd been standing in for years. I'd spent most of my life loving Lucas in the only way I knew how, through acts of service. Lunches packed, bills covered, problems solved before he even had to ask. I thought that kind of love was pure, unconditional. But what I never asked myself was, had he ever loved me outside of what I gave? If I stopped giving, who would I be to him? That question sat in my chest like a stone, and I already knew the answer. I saw it on Christmas. I heard it in his voice when he said, "It's just for us. You're not part of this family." You know, it's funny. When you're a mother, especially one from my generation, you're taught that your whole identity is supposed to be built around your usefulness. You cook, clean, sacrifice, put yourself last because that's what a good mom does. I believed it. I lived it. But no one tells you what to do when the people you raised start treating your usefulness like a burden and your love like an obligation. Nobody warns you that your greatest heartbreak might not come from a failed marriage or losing a friend, but from the child you gave your life to, slowly closing the door and pretending they don't see you standing there. I sat down on the cold basement bench and let the hum of the dryer fill the silence. For the first time, I wasn't sad. I was clear. I didn't want revenge. Not in the way people usually think of it. I didn't want Lucas to suffer. I didn't want to scream or take anything away out of spite. I just wanted to stop being erased. I wanted to be seen, for once, not for what I could give, but for who I was when I wasn't giving. That's not revenge. That's self-respect finally waking up from a long, exhausted sleep. I walked back upstairs and brewed myself a cup of tea. Not the cheap store-brand bags I used to keep for myself while saving the good stuff for when company came. No, I made the nice blend, the one I bought for holidays. I poured it into the floral china mug I usually save for guests because I realized that day I am allowed to be the guest of honor in my own life. I sat by the window and sipped slowly, watching the street. People passed in heavy coats, holding coffee, walking dogs, living, being, not performing, not proving. And I thought, what if I just stopped proving my worth to people who already decided they wouldn't see it? What if I didn't answer Lucas next time he called? What if I took that retirement money, what's left of it, and used it to build a life that actually included me? That thought wasn't radical. It was revolutionary. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started on New Year's Eve, and flipped to a blank page. This time, I didn't list what I'd lost or what they owed me. I made a different kind of list. Places I've always wanted to go. Things I used to love doing before motherhood became my job title. Names of people I stopped calling because I was always too busy helping. That night, I made soup for one. I lit a candle. I played music that wasn't background noise, but something I actually enjoyed. And I didn't feel lonely. Not really. I felt like someone finally sitting in her own seat at the table. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't tell anyone I'd had a revelation. But from that moment on, I knew. Lucas could keep his beach resort. Karen could keep her curated family photos. They could all go on pretending I didn't matter. I was done pretending too. But unlike them, I wasn't going to erase anyone. I was just going to make space for someone else. Me. When people talk about starting over, they make it sound like some big dramatic thing. Packing your bags in the middle of the night, quitting your job, buying a one-way ticket to somewhere warm and poetic. That wasn't how it happened for me. It started with a haircut. Nothing drastic, just a few inches off, a softer shape. The kind of thing that wouldn't catch anyone's eye. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the woman who'd been standing quietly in the corners of her own life. I saw someone beginning to breathe. Next came the closet. I donated half my clothes, most of which I'd held onto not because I loved them, but because they were practical or polite. Blouses I wore to church, sweaters I kept just in case Karen ever came over and said it was chilly. I kept only what I liked, what I felt good in. Then I deleted my calendar app. I'd lived so long by other people's schedules. Babysitting requests, birthday dinners I was expected to pay for, weekend drop-ins that left me cooking for 5 and thanked by none. Now, my time was mine again, and I was done explaining that to anyone. I started walking every morning, just 30 minutes at first, then longer. There's a bookstore cafe downtown I used to pass by and think, someday when I have time. So one morning, I just went in. I ordered a strong coffee and picked up a poetry book by a woman I'd never heard of. I read for an hour. No one interrupted. No one asked me for anything. It was the most sacred silence I'd ever known. Then one night, around mid-February, I took the biggest step of all. I listed the apartment. Not in a panic, not out of pain, but with a clear, peaceful kind of certainty. That place had held so many versions of me. Joanne the helper, Joanne the backup plan, Joanne the forgotten, but I was ready to make room for someone new. A week later, it sold. Quickly. Above asking price. Lucas didn't even know. I hadn't heard from him since early January, when he'd left a voicemail that said, "Hey, hope you're okay. The kids miss you." But there was no follow-up, no, "How are you?" No, "I'm sorry." I didn't expect one anymore. I found a small cottage on the coast 2 hours west. Nothing fancy, but it had a garden and a worn wooden porch that faced the ocean. The landlord was a retired mechanic who liked to fish and didn't ask a lot of questions. I paid 6 months in advance with the sale from my apartment and left no forwarding address. I didn't block Lucas. I just stopped waiting. Some days, I still missed Lily and Owen. That part never fully went away, but even that ache softened over time. I stopped checking Karen's social media for vacation photos. I stopped bracing myself for texts that never came. Instead, I planted herbs, took an online memoir writing class. I joined a women's circle at the local library where we drank lukewarm coffee and talked about aging and anger and rediscovering joy in late chapters. One of them, her name was Ruth, once said something that stuck with me. At some point, you stop waiting for the people who hurt you to see what they did. You just start living like you've already been seen. And that, I realized, was exactly what I was doing. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology. Not for acknowledgement. Not for a seat at someone else's table. I was building my own. One evening in March, just before the sky turned pink, I sat out on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the tide roll in. No noise, no guilt, no shame. And I thought, this must be what freedom feels like. Not flashy, not loud, just still. steady, whole. I didn't need anyone to know what I'd survived. I didn't need credit for how quietly I'd walked away. I didn't need to explain why I stopped giving everything to people who gave nothing in return, because healing isn't a performance. It's a reclamation. And in that little seaside cottage, with wind in my hair and salt in the air, I reclaimed the only thing they'd truly tried to take, my right to exist without being useful to them. Spring came slow to the coast, the kind of spring where the daffodils take their time blooming and the wind still bites at your sleeves in the morning. But it came, and with it, something in me softened. I'd been in the cottage 3 months when I got the first letter. It wasn't handwritten. It came in a white envelope addressed to Ms. Joanne Pritchard, like I was a stranger. The return address was Lucas and Karen's. Inside, a printed note. "We've been trying to reach you. Lily's birthday is coming up. She keeps asking about you. We're sorry for how things were said. We miss you. Let's talk." No love, no apology with teeth. Just that vague softness people use when they're not sure if they're really sorry or just uncomfortable with silence. I set the letter on the table and went back to trimming the rosemary bush by the fence. A week later, another envelope arrived. This time it was a drawing. Lily's handwriting was unmistakable. "I wish you were at my party. I made you a cake in my head." It broke something open in me. Not in a bad way. Not like before. It wasn't pain. It was peace and sadness wrapped together, like the tide pulling something loose from the shore. I didn't call. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I'd learned something. Being missed isn't the same as being valued. They missed what I gave. The gifts, the meals, the convenience. But did they miss me? The woman underneath all that? Sometimes people only notice the light once it's gone. And sometimes they don't want the light back. They just want it to flicker enough so they don't feel bad about letting it go. That may sound cold, but it's not. It's clarity. Clarity isn't bitterness. It's the quiet strength of knowing who you are when no one is watching. If you're watching this and it feels familiar, if someone's only reaching for you now that your hands are empty, tell me truly, do you believe they see you or just the version of you that made their life easier? Drop a comment if you've ever experienced this kind of silence, the one where your absence suddenly matters more than your presence ever did. I promise, you're not alone here. In April, I heard from Ruth again, the woman from the library group. She was planning a small gathering for older women in the area. "Not a support group," she said with a laugh, "more like a celebration of everything we've survived." I brought a lemon pie and a story. My own. I didn't name names. I didn't vent or dramatize. I just said, I was someone who gave until I disappeared, and then one day, I started giving back to myself. They nodded. They understood. That was all I needed. One afternoon, a neighbor knocked. She'd gotten a package meant for me by mistake. We talked on the porch for a while. Nothing deep, just weather, recipes, her garden. But when she left, I realized something strange. I hadn't mentioned my son once. Not because I was hiding him, but because I wasn't building my life around him anymore. That was its own kind of healing. The kind that doesn't get a parade, the kind no one posts about, but it matters. I never wrote Lucas back, not out of punishment, but because that version of me, the one waiting to be welcomed again, didn't live here anymore. Lily, though, I kept her drawing. It's taped to the side of the fridge, next to a grocery list and a note to buy birdseed. Someday, maybe, I'll send her a letter. Not to re-enter the life they left me out of, just to let her know she was always seen. But as for the rest, I chose the quiet. I chose my peace. And that was the most radical decision of all. I still walk the beach most mornings. The wind's strong this time of year, and I have to tuck my scarf tighter. But it feels good. It reminds me I'm still here, still moving, still whole. The cottage isn't big. The mailbox stays mostly empty, but there's room now for books, for friends, for laughter, for naps in the sun, and for me. Not the mother they expected, not the giver they assumed would never run out. Just Joanne, seen, whole, enough. There's something sacred about a life that no longer runs on someone else's clock. I wake when I wake, not because a child is crying or someone needs lunch packed, but because my body is rested. I make my coffee slowly. I open the window just a bit, enough to hear the ocean, enough to let the salt air in. Most mornings, I walk to the shore with no destination. I don't track my steps. I don't check my phone. I just walk until something inside me says, "This is far enough today." There's a rhythm now, a quiet one I didn't realize I needed. At first, it felt strange, this stillness. My hands, so used to cooking for others, folding their clothes, transferring money between accounts, didn't quite know what to do when there was nothing expected of them. My phone didn't buzz. My calendar was empty. My front door stayed closed. But slowly, I found new patterns. I started cooking for myself, not just leftovers or whatever was quick. Real meals, dishes I used to make before my life became a constant scramble of, what do they want to eat? I lit candles at dinner. I poured wine without needing a reason. I listened to music, my music, not whatever was playing on someone else's playlist in the background of my life. I started writing again, too. Not stories, just thoughts, fragments, small pieces of myself I'd forgotten. Today, I remembered I love the color green. No one needed me, and I didn't panic. I don't miss the noise. I thought I would. It wasn't grand. Nothing about this new rhythm was loud, but it was mine. There's a bench not far from my cottage facing the sea. Most afternoons, I sit there with a cup of tea and watch the horizon. I nod to the same dog walkers, the same old couple that collects shells. We don't speak much, but there's comfort in the routine. Last week, the woman, her name's Donna, sat beside me. She asked if I was new to the town. I smiled and said, sort of. She told me she'd moved here after her divorce at 62, left her whole life behind in Boise, started over with 2 suitcases and a painting hobby. You don't need much, she said, when you finally stop apologizing for taking up space. I knew exactly what she meant. That night, I journaled. I used to think my value was in being needed. Now I think it's in being at peace. Sometimes I still think about Lucas and Lily. I wonder how her birthday party went, if she looked for me in the crowd, if she wore the yellow dress I sent 2 years ago. But I don't let the wondering take root. That's a new rhythm too, not chasing what doesn't come back. A few days ago, I got a text from an unknown number. It just said, "Hey, just wondering if we could talk sometime." No name, but I knew it was Lucas. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel thrilled. I just felt. Then I turned off the phone and slipped it into the drawer because I wasn't ready to let his urgency interrupt my rhythm. He had years to see me, to hear me, to hold space for me. Now I had my own space, and I didn't owe it to anyone. This life I was building, it wasn't meant to be a lesson to him. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. Soft, slow, dignified survival. I planted daisies by the window yesterday, and I stood barefoot in the soil, remembering the first time I taught Lucas to garden. He'd cried when a worm surprised him in the dirt. I told him, "It's okay. Everything that grows starts a little messy." I smiled at the memory, not with regret, just recognition, because I was growing again too, and it was messy and beautiful and mine. It was late April when the calls started. First, a missed one from a number I didn't save, then another and another, all from the same area code I'd left behind. I didn't answer. They didn't leave voicemails, at least not the kind that said anything, just those empty ones with soft static, a click, then nothing. It wasn't until I got the envelope that I knew something had shifted. A pale blue card, addressed to Grandma Joe, written in Lily's handwriting. The letters shaky and uneven. "I miss your hugs. Daddy says you're on a trip. Are you coming back soon? I saved a seashell for you." That one hurt in a quiet way. Not because it pulled me back, but because it reminded me of who I had always been to her. The part of me that gave hugs, not money. The part that remembered her favorite snack and sang songs in the car. That woman didn't disappear. She just moved herself to safety. I placed the card on the mantel. I didn't need to respond yet. I just needed to sit with the weight of it. A week later, Ruth from the library group called to say a journalist from a small coastal magazine wanted to feature some of the women from our circle, older women who had reinvented their lives after loss. Ruth said she gave them my name. You don't have to say yes, she added. But the way you've rebuilt, it's worth sharing. I said I'd think about it. That night, I walked the shoreline for longer than usual, the salt wind stinging my eyes. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, a feeling I hadn't named in years. Pride, not performative, not loud, but the kind that came from surviving something most people don't even realize exists. See, when a woman disappears quietly from her family, people don't notice right away. Not when she's always been the one holding the camera, not in the frame. Not when her name shows up on checks, not birthday invitations. But over time, the absence speaks louder than her presence ever did. Lucas sent a text that next morning. Can we talk? I know I hurt you. I don't know how to fix it. I read it over coffee, watching the fog roll in over the water. I didn't reply. Fixing it would require something deeper than words. It would take time, humility, acknowledgement, not just of what he did, but of what I endured in silence. And for once, I wasn't in a rush to make someone else feel better. I got a letter from Karen the week after, typed, formal. We'd like to apologize. We were wrong. You've always been generous, and we didn't appreciate you the way we should have. Lily keeps asking for you. Please consider coming to her school play in June. It was probably the most honest thing I'd ever received from her. I placed that letter under the same magnet as Lily's card, and then I went outside and sat on the porch. The garden had started blooming. My neighbor Donna waved from across the lawn. I lifted my cup in reply. The world was noticing. Not just them, but me. The grocery clerk who remembered my name and asked about my baking. The librarian who set aside a novel she thought I'd love. The young woman at the beach who asked how I stayed so calm. Small things, but they meant something. They meant I was seen. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't invisible. Not because I did something for someone, not because I was needed, but simply because I was there, fully, in my own life. You know, sometimes people don't realize what they've lost until the quiet becomes too loud to ignore. That's what was happening now. Lucas wasn't looking for a ride to the airport or help with a bill. Karen wasn't asking for a babysitter or loan. They were asking for me. But I had to ask myself, were they asking because they missed my presence or because they finally felt my absence? There's a difference. One comes from love. The other comes from convenience no longer available. So I sat with it. I didn't respond. I didn't reject it either. I just held space because I had learned to move at a different pace now, one that respected my time, my boundaries, and my healing. And if they wanted to be part of this new life, they would have to arrive quietly, respectfully, not demanding, but honoring. The school play was on a Thursday. I knew because Karen had sent a second letter, this time more personal, handwritten even, with Lily's drawing enclosed. A stick figure stage, a girl in a yellow dress, and 3 crooked hearts. I'll sing the loudest if you're there. That line sat with me for days. There was a time I would have shown up without a second thought. I would have baked cookies for the class, brought flowers, sat in the front row. But that version of me had been pulled too thin, had given too much for too little. I didn't want to return out of guilt, and I didn't want to stay away out of pride. I wanted to show up, only if I could do it with peace. So I wrote back, not to Karen, to Lily. Thank you for the beautiful drawing. I'm proud of you. No matter what song you sing, you'll always be my favorite voice. I didn't say I'd come. I didn't say I wouldn't. I just gave her what she needed. My love. No strings. 2 days later, Lucas called. This time I answered. His voice cracked. Hi, Mom. I didn't think you'd pick up. I didn't think you'd call. I replied, my tone calm but steady. There was silence. Then a sigh. I know I messed things up. I was selfish. I let Karen dictate too much, but I miss you, and Lily misses you. I know, I said. I want to make things right. I paused. Lucas, I'm not angry, not anymore. But you don't get to miss me without understanding what you did to push me away. I didn't disappear to punish you. I left to protect myself. He went quiet. I know, he said finally. I know now. Then let's be honest, I said. If we want any future, it has to be built on something real. I won't come back into your lives the way I used to. I won't be the unpaid babysitter, the emergency wallet, the backup plan. If that's what you're reaching for, we're done before we start. He was quiet again, but not defensive. I don't want you to be those things anymore, he said. I want you to just be you, and I want to know what that means. That line surprised me. I told him I'd think about the play, that I wasn't making promises, but I was open to something. After the call, I sat on the porch and watched the clouds drift. The air smelled like sea salt and lilac. It reminded me that healing didn't mean returning to old roles. It meant choosing what you let back in and why. To those watching, have you ever had someone reach out? Not because they finally understood, but because they finally felt the cost of your absence? Drop a comment if you've ever had to draw a boundary with someone you love. How did you do it without losing yourself in the guilt? That week, I made a list. Not for them, for me. Boundaries I'll keep even if it hurts. I don't explain my no. I give only what I want, not what I'm pressured to. I will not sacrifice peace for performance. I am allowed to say, not this time. Lucas sent a text the night before the play. We'll leave a seat for you just in case. No pressure, just love. It made me cry. Not because it changed everything, but because it finally didn't ask me to be more than I had. I didn't go to the play. Instead, I watched the sun set from my porch. I lit a candle and played Lily's favorite lullaby. I whispered, "Sing your heart out, baby," into the wind. That night, I dreamed of her smile. No guilt, no grief, just softness. Because love without boundaries is not love, it's survival. And I had survived long enough. Now I was learning how to live. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of quiet Sunday that wraps itself around your shoulders like a shawl. Soft, slow, and warm. I was in the garden, trimming back the rosemary and humming along to a song I hadn't heard in years, when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I turned, and there he was, Lucas. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but diminished in a way only time and consequence can make a man shrink. He stood there awkwardly, holding a paper bag and a folded jacket under one arm. I wiped my hands on my apron and met him halfway down the path. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Lucas, eh?" I nodded. Calm as still water. He shifted his weight, unsure of what to do. I didn't offer a hug. Not yet. Instead, I stepped aside and motioned toward the porch. "You drove a long way," I said. He sat on the old bench, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. "It's beautiful here. Peaceful," he said. "It is," I replied, "and I plan to keep it that way." He looked down at the paper bag and handed it to me. "Brought some of your favorite tea and some cookies Lily made. She wanted you to have something." I took the bag, placed it beside me, and waited. He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I only came to you when I needed something, about how I let Karen push you out." I didn't nod. I didn't rescue him with words. I let the silence stretch, soft but firm. "I didn't know how far I'd pushed you until you were gone," he continued. "And now, I'm not asking you to come back to that life. I know you won't. I just wanted to see you, to let you know. I see you now." His voice cracked on the last word. That was the moment I felt it. Not forgiveness, clarity. I wasn't here to hand out absolution. I wasn't here to make him feel better about what he'd done. I was here, in this moment, because I had finally built a life he couldn't take from me. I stood, walked inside, and returned with 2 mugs of hot water. I steeped the tea he brought, set 1 mug in front of him. "This doesn't mean everything is okay," I said. "I know. he whispered. But this, I gestured to the porch, the tea, the calm around us, is how things work now. You come with respect, you come with honesty, you come quietly, or you don't come at all. He nodded. We sipped in silence for a while, the kind that felt heavy but necessary. Eventually, he stood. I'll go. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, and that I want to do better, even if it's too late. He turned toward the path, then paused. Lily talks about you almost every day, he said. If one day you wanted to write her or call, she'd be over the moon. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed him to walk away without a reward, no reassurance, no emotional prize. He did. And when the sound of his car faded, I sat back down and wrapped my hands around the warm mug. He had seen me. At last. But it wasn't his recognition that made me whole. It was the fact that I no longer needed it. You know, there's something powerful about letting someone in after you've healed, when they no longer get to define the terms, when the house is already built and they're just a visitor at the door. If you've ever reached that moment where someone from your past finally shows up, but this time you're the one holding the boundary, leave a comment. Tell me how it felt to protect your peace, even when love pulled at your sleeve, because that's what love without boundaries does. It pulls, but love with boundaries, it lets go, or it grows. And I had finally learned the difference. 2 weeks passed after Lucas's visit. The garden bloomed into early summer. The air turned heavy with the scent of salt and jasmine. Life moved forward as if nothing had shifted. But deep down, I knew something had. Not with him, with me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt balanced. Like the scales had stopped tipping against me, and for the first time in decades, I could breathe in my own life without asking permission. Then came the letter, not from Lucas, not from Karen, from Lily. Crayon on lined paper, the envelope had glitter smudged on one corner. I opened it gently, already smiling. Hi, Grandma Jo. My play went great. I sang real loud just like you said. Daddy said you might write back, so I'm writing first. I want to see you. I don't care where. Can I come visit? No guilt, no manipulation, just a child's voice reaching for warmth. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long while. Then I made myself a cup of tea and walked to the edge of the yard where the ocean met the sky. I knew what I had to do. The following weekend, Lily stepped out of Lucas's car in a lemon-yellow dress. Her curls had grown longer, pulled back in a half ponytail that bounced when she ran. She carried a pink backpack and something wrapped in tissue paper. Lucas stayed in the car. I met her halfway down the path. She looked up at me and whispered, "Hi, Grandma." And I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I knelt down and held her. Not just a quick hug, a real one. One that says, I see you, I've missed you, and I'm still here. She pulled back and held up the tissue bundle. I made you something. Inside was a seashell, painted blue with stars. On the inside, in gold marker, "You're my safe place." It nearly undid me. We spent the afternoon in the garden. I showed her how to gently snip basil. We planted a small pot of lavender with her name on it. We drank lemonade and played old records on the porch. She didn't ask why I hadn't come to the play. I didn't explain why I'd stayed away. There was no need. Some connections don't need explanations. They just need space to grow again, on new soil. As the sun began to dip, Lucas approached from the car, keeping his distance. I walked Lily back to him and knelt again. "You can come visit any time," I said, "but next time, maybe just you and me." She nodded enthusiastically. "Can I stay for a whole weekend?" "We'll talk about it," Lucas added gently, watching my face. I stood up and met his eyes. "Boundaries still stand." "I understand," he said. Then he did something I never expected. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. "It's a letter I wrote. For you. You don't have to read it now. I thought I should say everything in my own words without expecting anything back." I took it, gave a small nod, and then watched them drive away. Later that night, I read his letter by candlelight. It wasn't perfect. There were gaps, soft spots where he still didn't fully grasp the depth of what he'd done. But there was sincerity, and for the first time, there was ownership. That mattered. I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote back to Lily, told her about the lavender sprout, the hummingbirds that visited my porch, and how proud I was of her singing voice, even though I wasn't there to hear it. Because love, when it's real, doesn't need to shout. It just shows up, quietly, consistently, gently. If you've ever been in that place where the people who hurt you finally come forward, not with excuses, but with a desire to learn, you know it's not easy to let them close again. Have you ever rebuilt trust on your own terms? Not because you forgot what they did, but because you chose what mattered more? Let me know in the comments. There's power in choosing peace over punishment, especially when it's your peace. The next morning, I sat in the garden and watched the sun touch Lily's tiny lavender pot. It leaned toward the light, just beginning to bloom, like me. The cottage is quiet this morning. The sea is calm, a sheet of glass stretching into the soft gray sky. I can hear the kettle whistling, the old floorboards creaking under my steps, the gentle hum of the world as it wakes up with me. This stillness isn't empty. It's full of me. It's been 8 months since I moved here, since I stopped begging to be seen and started choosing what to see for myself. Lucas writes from time to time. His notes have changed. Less about him, more about Lily. Short, respectful. He never asks for anything. Just small updates, like a guest knocking gently on a door he knows isn't always open. I appreciate the shift. But I no longer wait by the window for anyone to show up. Lily visited last month. We baked banana bread and painted seashells. She brought a photo of her school concert. In the picture, she's smiling so wide you'd think the world had never broken a single promise to her. That made me feel something new. Not regret, not sadness, just warmth. Like maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to be present in every chapter of someone's life to matter. Sometimes planting the seed is enough. I've made friends here. Real ones. Women like me. Quiet survivors, starting over not with fire but with softness. We meet every other Friday. We drink tea and talk about silly things, a recipe that failed, a book that surprised us the way the moon looked the night before. None of us asks what we did before. None of us brags about who we were to someone else. We just sit together as we are now. There's a kind of reverence in being seen without performance. Last week, I found an old photo in a drawer. Me holding Lucas as a baby. His cheeks were chubby, his eyes round. I looked tired, but happy, proud. Back then, I believed every sacrifice would be remembered, that love was a guarantee of gratitude. But life doesn't hand out trophies for endurance. And motherhood, especially the kind that swallows you whole, often ends with silence, not applause. I tucked the photo back where I found it, not out of bitterness, out of love. A quiet, matured kind of love that no longer needs to be repaid. Because what I've learned is this: you don't need them to say thank you, to let go. You don't need their apologies to heal. You don't need a grand reunion to rebuild yourself. All you need is the courage to stop giving from a place of fear and start living from a place of choice. And that's what I've done. The porch smells like rosemary and lemon oil. The wind carries in the sound of waves, and I let it wrap around me like a song I once knew. I'm not the woman I was last Christmas, the one who stood outside in the cold being told she didn't belong, the one who gave and gave, only to be erased in the name of convenience. That woman was brave, but she was tired. I thank her for getting me here, because now I am someone else, not harder, not colder, just freer. If you're still watching, thank you. Not just for staying, but for feeling this story with me. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever walked away, not in anger, but in peace, and found that the world didn't fall apart without you? That instead you stopped falling apart inside yourself? If so, share your story in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. This isn't just a revenge story, it's a rebirth story. And for those of you still sitting in the silence, waiting for someone to say, I see you, Let this be the moment you see yourself. Because sometimes the greatest victory is choosing your own quiet, your own porch, your own life, and never handing it away again.